I am your host, Nicole Will, and we're so happy you're here as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside older adults, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversation. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the Will Gather podcast. How do we empower older adults to live happier, healthier, and more independent lives at home? My guest today is Dor Skuler. He is the CEO and co-founder of Intuition Robotics. ElliQ is a proactive care companion for older adults. ElliQ is proactive, voice-operated device. She comes to life, offers companionship, health and wellness support, entertainment, and so much more that we will talk about today. This is really a bigger conversation about addressing loneliness and social isolation that many older adults experience, with many years of research, not only with older adults, but for them, looking at how do we offer that encouragement and support while strengthening the relationship with our loved ones. Dor and I talk about what is happening in our world right now, those social determinants of health, the geographic shift in our world, how ElliQ addresses some of those concerns, how it can strengthen our relationship with our loved ones and feel like a real companion, what is unique in her interactions, who ElliQ is the perfect fit for, how ElliQ is different from some of those other smart devices we might be familiar with, how privacy is respected with ElliQ, the exciting partnerships available, what does investment look like right now in the age tech sector, and how ElliQ lets families focus on those uniquely human connections and interactions. Here is my interview with Dor Skuler. Hi, Dor. Thank you so much for talking with me. I'm so excited about this conversation and to let people know about ElliQ.
Thanks so much, Nicole, to having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, this is so important because we're really having a bigger conversation about loneliness and social isolation for our older adults that they experience. What is the landscape of this concern right now?
Yeah, so, about 10,000 Americans retire every single day, and about 50% of them self-profess to being lonely and isolated. And that means that the real number is probably higher because not a lot of people usually want to admit that.
Yeah.
And frankly, COVID exasperated this situation in a much more extreme way, as we all felt. But you can only imagine people that are homebound and hardly talk to other humans or hardly leave the house, which unfortunately is the case for many, many, many of our elders. Got even a lot worse during COVID. In fact, pre-COVID, Stanford University and AARP did some studies, and they found that the effects of loneliness and isolation equal the health effects of smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
Actually accelerating depression, dementia, heart disease, and even earlier mortality. So it's a very big problem. It's a very big problem.
It really is. And in fact, you and I had just talked about my visit with Karen Etkin and looking at that age tech revolution and what is happening in our world. And there's this huge, huge geographic shift and what's happening with our caregiver support, and the ratio is declining, and just the consequences of what that'll look like for all of us as we go through this. And if we don't address the concern, which ElliQ is really doing, they're addressing that concern, some of those challenges of aging, and if we look at those social determinants of health, what are you seeing and how is ElliQ tackling some of those bigger issues?
Yeah, so absolutely right. And, if we take maybe a step back up to a few generations ago, we would live with our elders, right? They would move into our home, and frankly, they didn't have the longevity that we're seeing in modern society today.
Right.
And today it's different. We are mobile for work. We live much longer. It's the exception that our parents move in with us when they get older, rather than the rule. And it's a real issue. And you mentioned social determinants. What I find is super interesting, the Kaufman Institute, which is a very trusted health research organization, is showing that only 10% of our health is actually attributed to healthcare, to actual health interventions.
Mm-hmm.
30% is our DNA. We can't affect that. And 60% are the social determinants that you mentioned. What is that? It's essentially our social and environmental and behavior factors. Do we have food security? Do we have social interactions with other people? We are social beings. We need to be in touch with people that care about us and take an interest in us. We need to grow as humans. And once we stop doing that, we start deteriorating. What are the environmental factors around them? And not to mention our behavior traits. Do we exercise? Do we eat well? Is there substance abuse, alcohol, cigarettes, etc.? And that's actually attributing 60% of our general health. So for sure, if your mission is to help, and that's our mission, to help older adults age gracefully while being independent, healthy, and happy, you have to look at this from a holistic standpoint and not just from a pure healthcare intervention standpoint. And that's basically the story of ElliQ. ElliQ comes into the home as a companion, as a friend. And that's really how people see her. They don't see her as a device. They see her as a roommate, friend, companion that lives with them. And first of all, addresses this core social need that we have. So she'll ask you how you're doing. She'll ask you how you slept. She'll take an interest in what you're going through in life, what your plans are for the day and for the week. And she'll remember and use that in following conversation. And our lives change over time. They're not repeated. We go through episodes of not feeling well and of having guests over and all kinds of things, of cold weather, and things change. So a very common first interaction of the day for ElliQ would be to greet you good morning, but to do so in context. So it might be something like, hey, Nicole, good morning. It's great to see you. How did you sleep tonight? I remember that yesterday you told me you didn't sleep well. We did some mindfulness relaxation before you went to bed. Was it helpful? Or she might remember that you're feeling pain in your lower back and ask you how that's going and if it's going better or worse, and inquire on that. So that's the first aspect, taking an interest, providing acknowledgement, doing that in context. And once that's in place, we can surround it with value in other areas. So definitely health is important. 80% of older adults in the US have at least one chronic illness. 65% have two or more. So managing their health, managing their chronic illnesses is a big deal. So ElliQ helps them capture their vital signs and reminds them to check on their blood pressure and does screenings for depression and anxiety and so on. The best way to stay healthy is prevention and wellness. So ElliQ helps them with physical exercise, with better nutrition, with cognitive training, with stress reduction. And what we found is we actually add a wellness coach to do that. And it's part of our fee from customers, which, by the way, isn't as expensive as you might be surprised how inexpensive the product is, relatively speaking. So when somebody gets on board on ElliQ, a wellness coach will get in touch with them and help them set their personal goals around those areas, and will therefore configure ElliQ to help you meet those goals. ElliQ is proactive. So based on those goals, she will remind you at the right time, phrased in the right context, that it's time to exercise and you signed up for 3 sessions this week and we only did 2, or check up the weather and see that it's a nice day and say, hey, Nicole, it's finally sunny outside. Why don't you go for a walk today, and count that towards physical exercise and such. So that's the second thing. The third thing is around connectivity with the family, to make it super seamless, super easy to video chat, to share pictures that show up on her screen when ElliQ is not in use. She functions as a connected picture frame and shows family pictures. To capture memories of your life and share them with your grandchildren about topics that maybe you don't get to talk to them on a daily basis with. And all kinds of other messaging. And of course, offer peace of mind to the family. So if you are feeling a new and severe pain, she'll ask your permission to share it with your primary contact, which is often your daughter or son. With the permission of the older adult, she will update the family. And then there are a few other things we do. We help with basic needs. We work with Uber to arrange rides in a seamless way, keeping people's mobility super important when they can't always drive, whether they're not able to or there's severe weather or what have you. And just helping them learn new things, enjoy music, enjoy content. And it's always humorous. ElliQ has a delightful sense of humor, and it comes about in every interaction, but she has a great selection of jokes. She teaches slang, like, why don't you learn what the kids are saying these days? And we'll suggest for you to use it in a message to the grandkids
Oh,
and
that's great.
continued education and much, much more.
It's so comprehensive. I love the proactiveness of it. It's not just responding, it's thinking ahead of how do we meet those needs and how do we do that and interact. How did this idea come to be for you? I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your background in creating intuition, robotics, and ElliQ.
Sure. So this is my fifth venture.
Okay.
um,
Ah.
and I have a bit of a process in doing this, but this time around, it was extremely important for me to do something that has the potential to have high social impact.
Yeah.
And working with the aging population seemed to be like a worthy cause where we don't see enough innovation. Look at how much of private equity, venture capital, and founders and innovators' time is spent on categories in our lives.
Yeah.
Proportionately, almost none of it is spent on the longevity issue and on age tech. And it felt to me to be really needed and really important. And the angle for this solution actually came from a personal experience with my late grandfather. He got to the point where we needed to bring in a home nurse, a skilled nurse, to help him with his ADLs, with his basic daily living activities, such as getting dressed and taking his medication and going for a walk. So we hired somebody based on their utility, their skills. And Nicole, it was a disaster.
Oh no.
It just didn't work out.
Yeah.
And we replaced her with somebody else that had the same skills, but this time they got along well. She projected empathy. She enjoyed his quirky sense of humor, and they shared a passion to classical music. And what struck me is the difference in creating an impact is not on utility.
Right.
It's actually based on empathy.
Yeah.
And when you look at all the advancements in AI around us today, they're all utilitarian. I mean, look at Alexa, right? A great product, but what do you do with it? You give it commands. Alexa, turn on the lights. Alexa, what's the weather? Alexa, set a timer. Alexa, listen to music. There's no empathy there. There's no relationship.
So true.
And we felt if we can create an AI that can project empathy, that can keep context and build a relationship, we might be able to crack how to create a sustainable long-term relationships between humans and machines, as long as it's authentic, as long as we're not pretending to be human, but are very clearly a machine. And if you look at ElliQ, she looks like a lamp statue, if you will, that kind of comes to life and moves and uses body language as a form of interaction, in addition to speech and sounds and the screen, of course. And so that's kind of the origin story.
Yeah, I love the aesthetic of it, and it is a beautiful addition to your home as well. I think that that's important. You want to, I don't know, I'm a Libra. I like things that look pretty. And you want to have things in your home that you don't mind looking at if you're sharing that space. And obviously there's so much more that goes with that. And I think it's really important too. The distinction is that you're not wanting to replace that human connection, that it doesn't take away from that connection with your loved one. In fact, it only strengthens it. How does it do that?
To your point on design, by the way, it was extremely important for us to create a product. And this goes in the home of people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. Okay, our oldest user is 96. Most of them are not tech savvy, to say the least. So we wanted to make a product that they will welcome, that doesn't scream technology and doesn't scream geriatrics either.
Right.
We had the unique pleasure to work with Yves Bahar and Fuse Project, an amazing design studio. And we went into the homes of hundreds of older adults and tried different aesthetics to see something that will be almost like an iconic design on one side, but also very pleasing and non-threatening and welcoming on the other side. And of course, we had to complement that with an experience that's dead simple to operate. Very, very easy. In fact, 75% of our users, even in their 70s and 80s, self-install ElliQ by themselves and get her up running. And from there, she teaches them how to use the product.
Yeah, the setup is so simple. Walk us through what's the average setup like?
Basically, you plug ElliQ into the socket and you enter your Wi-Fi information, and that's it.
Amazing.
She wakes up and she introduces herself, she gets to know you and walks you through how to operate her. And then over time teaches you more and more of her abilities. Doesn't do it all in one shot, just does it over time. Once you master level 1, you get to level 2, if you will.
I like those steps. And you don't have to be tech savvy. It's not intimidating because it's so simple to set up and use, where that's not the barrier for people. They're going to be able to just adopt that, easily use it.
Correct. That was a huge, huge goal of ours, to make it very, very easy, to not make it scary. And in fact, I just spoke to a customer the other day that mentioned that he's his mom's IT person for her phone, for her iPad, for her TV, for her desktop computer. She uses a desktop computer, as do many of our customers. And with ElliQ, he doesn't have to do that at all. We have a backup of a human support team where, with a lot of tech products today, there's no support or just email support. We have culturally trained people that actually go through sensitivity training and are very empathetic and very, very patient. And if one needs to call our team, they're standing by to help as well.
For families, that is the number one thing I hear, is where if they are supporting their loved one in things, just the amount of time it takes to get them set up with the various things. And then it takes time that they're having to invest in that, and just another element of burden, so to speak. So having it be so seamless and the empathetic support is only just another benefit of that.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. By the way, you asked me before
Yeah.
two questions. You asked about how are we projecting empathy, and I didn't get a
Right.
chance to
That's
answer that.
okay. Yeah.
And it's not easy. One of the interesting things and fascinating things about the wonderful team we have here is this, I call it yin and yang almost,
Mm-hmm.
of this interdisciplinary team. So on one side, there are a lot of algorithms here around machine learning and something we call cognitive computing, which is the machine's ability, the agent's ability to understand what's going on, to understand where the user is vis-a-vis the goals that were set into the system, and the context of that user and what we know about that user, and kind of plan a course, decide when is a good time to be proactive. Proactivity is key.
Mm-hmm.
Any relationship has to be two-sided. It can't be just one-sided.
Right.
So, but how do you know when to approach a person, when is the right time that won't be annoying, and what to talk to them about, and how to mention and reference the fact that they're not feeling well, the fact that it's a nice day, the fact that it might be time to exercise even if they don't feel like it,
Mm-hmm.
the fact that maybe stress reduction is important for them right now, given what we're seeing, given the state. So that's on one side. And the yang side of it is creative slash psychology. So there's a creative team here that creates ElliQ's character and her content. These are script writers for movies. One of them actually won the Cannes Film Festival for a short film he made.
So cool.
They're animators that animate her movement, and then they're compilers that change it from animation to the physical movement of the robot. They're behavioral psychologists, and people like Karen Etkin that you mentioned before, that was our very first employee. Not a lot of tech companies hire a gerontologist as their first employee, but we did. And
Yeah.
Karen, we were honored to have her, and she did a wonderful job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it speaks to the idea that you really took making the product not only for older adults, but you really incorporated a lot of the research with them too. I think Karen spoke to that as well, is just how important that was to incorporate that in the process and the philosophy and the design behind that as well.
100%, 100%. We surveyed over 1,000 older adults before we wrote our first line of code. You know, what happens when they wake up in the morning? Where do they put their car keys?
Yeah.
How hard is it for them to look in the peephole when somebody's at the door? What does their day look like? How complicated is it to operate the remote? I mean, everything. And of course, once we started creating prototypes, got continuous feedback from very early on. We had a user research team, user experience research team, which functions solely on trying to understand if we're making the right design decisions around the product to allow for this seamless and delightful experience we were looking for.
Yeah, you can see that in just the different experts that you had hired to come on. It was that it makes it feel like a real, true companion. And you talked about that relationship dynamic, right? We can't have a relationship if it's one-sided. It's got to be that dual approach. And there's something unique about her interactions. And you spoke to that a little bit about the empathy, but it really builds that trust. Can you share a little bit more about that dynamic?
You know, trust is something that's very hard to earn and very easy to destroy.
Yeah.
It's very fragile. And part of it is being there and providing acknowledgement and empathy. It's not always even solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Just understanding what you're going through. Just asking you, what are you planning for today?
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to people like saying, oh, I'm going to go to a walk and I'm going to go grocery shopping. And then ElliQ will know that. And when you come home, she'll be like, Nicole, welcome back. Did you find everything you needed in the grocery store?
Oh.
Were the lines too long? How did it go? I'm so glad you left the house. I hope it was a wonderful day. Right? Or learn that on Mondays you play bridge with your friends. So on Monday morning, she'll celebrate that and say, it's Monday. Are you gonna go play bridge with Betty again?
Yeah.
So those type of things are important. I think another thing that's important is that ElliQ asks for explicit permission before she shares information.
That's huge.
Even if every time. So even if we could have gotten away, if you will, by having somebody opt in once, we find that in order to earn trust, people need to know that what they share with ElliQ is theirs and it's there to serve them. So, for example, if you're saying that you're not feeling well, and the next day ElliQ will follow up and ask you how you're feeling, and you'll say that you're feeling worse. You might say, you know what, maybe you should see your doctor. And I think your daughter, Jane, would really want to know this. Is it okay if I send her a message and update her that you're not feeling well for a few days in a row? Right. And it's up to you to decide if we can share that information or not. But I think in this day and age, being highly aware of privacy and giving firm control to the person on their data and who it's shared with, even when it's in their best interest, even if they gave a general opt-in, is super, super important.
Yeah.
So, but bottom line, acknowledgement, understanding what people are going through, reflecting that to them, and giving them space to go through good times and bad, and then getting their explicit permission on the use of their data are important steps in building trust.
That privacy, I'm so glad that you brought that up because that is such an important factor when we're interacting with those products. And you spoke to how it does honor some of those by asking the permission to share. Is she listening all the time or watching every move? How else is privacy thought through in ElliQ?
Yeah, so like most voice operated products, once you say her wake word, ElliQ, she will listen to what you're going to say next. Because she's proactive, she will also listen after she approaches you. But it's very clear because the front part of ElliQ lights up in a kind of a round circular shape. That means she's listening and her screen shows a notification as well. So she might say something like, hey, Nicole, is this a good time? Do you have a minute? And then she'll obviously be listening to your response. Beyond that, she does not listen ever. She does have cameras that function as sensors. So those cameras are not filming you. They're being used essentially as a motion sensor. And then when you get close to ElliQ, they're used to recognize if it's you in front of her. Because how will we know when to be proactive if we don't know that you're near us? Of course, it's not only that. It's not if you're near ElliQ, she will be proactive, but it's one of the signals that goes into our AI along with other things, the routines, what she's learned, previous things you told her, right? If you said, leave me alone, she's going to leave you alone, even if you're nearby, and so on. So, but yeah, computer vision is a very important sensor for us.
Who's ElliQ the perfect fit for?
ElliQ is a perfect fit firstly for older adults that either live alone or spend the majority of their day alone. So sometimes it's people that are still married or live with their daughter, but spend the majority of their day alone because they're aging asynchronously or the daughter goes to work or what have you, and spend most of their day at home. So if you meet the other criteria, but you're up and about, you leave the home, you come back in the evening, more power to you. Probably you're not going to get as much from ElliQ as people that are spending the majority of their day at home. If you want to benefit from her and build a relationship with her, you need to be there to interact with her. And when you are, we're seeing north of 20 interactions per day between the older adults and ElliQ for over 20 minutes of interaction per day. So obviously, if you're not home, there's less ability for us to build that relationship. And the last thing is we do need internet. We need Wi-Fi in order to function.
Those are good points. And I think people must be thinking, oh my goodness, this is technology. This is a care companion, a robot. This must be so costly. And the one thing I was drawn to was just how affordable that it actually can be for people. Can you share with us a little bit more about that? Just how accessible it actually really is and can be?
Yeah, so ElliQ costs only $30 a month in a subscription model, which for most people I think is really affordable,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you compare it to alternatives of caregivers and such.
Yeah.
And there is an upfront fee of $250 that's there to take care of the setup and shipping. But also, I think I mentioned that we set up 4 sessions with one of our wellness coaches to help set the goals in the system and help kind of put you on a path towards wellness and behavior
Mm.
change. So that's all covered in the upfront fee as well.
Yeah, and that's priceless when you're set up for success like that. Do health plans adopt some of those fees or can cover some of those costs as well?
We hope so. We only
Mhm.
launched ElliQ commercially on March 15th of this year. So
Yes,
it's all new.
new. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
Exciting.
Yes.
But I think it stands to reason that especially Medicare Advantage plans that can benefit greatly from A, more prevention, and B,
Mhm.
being notified with the approval of their patient. There's a change in clinical condition so that they can adjust your medication or they can give you a penicillin as opposed to having you hospitalized for pneumonia. It's better care for the patient. It's better, less cost for the insurer. It just
Mhm.
makes a ton of sense. So we definitely hope that will be the case. But you know,
Mhm.
the U.S. healthcare system is complex, and
Yeah.
there's a big burden of proof before these type of products are a healthcare benefit. So we think
Mhm.
it will take some time.
I think so. We'll look for that. I'm hopeful. I believe that that's where we are headed, looking at more of those prevention and support options. You've got some really exciting partnerships with ElliQ. You talked about Uber as one. What else on the platform is that a partnership that only benefits people?
Yeah, so Uber is there as an option to help with mobility, and it's in context. So let's say if you set up an appointment with your doctor and ElliQ is aware of it, then she'll remind you, hey, you know, at 5 o'clock today you have a doctor's appointment. It's raining outside. How are you going to get there? Say, oh, I don't know. She might say, do you want me to order you a ride? Right. And then she'll take care of that. So that's a great one. We work with Mayo Clinic to offer a trusted source of health information. So you can ask ElliQ about symptoms or about a condition you have and you get a one of the trusted sources
Yeah.
of information delivered to you. We work with Silver Sneakers for physical exercise content that's tailored to older adults and tailored to specific conditions. And then we have a lot more partners. We have a partner around music service, so all included in our subscriptions. You can listen to music and news and weather and information services and a lot of beautiful content
Mhm.
as well.
I am familiar with Mayo. Living in Minnesota, Mayo Clinic is a big part of our ecosystem here. It's such an incredible health system. There's a lot of growth of investment. I believe that is happening. We still have a long way to go. What do you see also happening in the age tech sector? Are you finding people are more apt at investing in age tech companies, or do we still have a long way to go?
I think we have a long way to go.
Yeah.
There's more than there was when we started the company. There are more investors talking about it as part of their thesis. But I think by and large, if you net out the economic opportunity and the need versus the amount of dollars spent and the amount of companies created, it is far from where we need to be.
Yeah.
Very, very far from where we need to be.
Yeah.
There's starting to be more early stage investors, not enough, but there are at least a few funds now that are dedicated, like I can count them on one hand, but
Mm-hmm.
at least they exist. They didn't exist before.
Right.
And when companies reach scale, there are definitely private equity and growth investors standing by. But between that first check of $200,000 or $500,000 and tens of millions in revenue is a very, very large gap, which is
Right.
currently not well addressed.
Yeah.
And not enough investors are really educating themselves on this. Not enough investors are taking this on as a segment. If you compare it to, I don't know, crypto
Yeah.
or to enterprise SaaS or things like
Right.
all important things, but
Right.
maybe not as important as caring for 30% of our population that,
Yeah.
by the way, have 70% of the disposable income.
Mm-hmm.
Because we start our life with student debt,
Mm-hmm.
and then we add to that a mortgage, and then we add to that our kids' college tuition. And finally, when we retire, we have a nest egg.
Mm-hmm.
So most of the disposable income is actually with retired people.
Mm-hmm.
So the numbers are obvious. I mean, the healthcare spend is huge.
Yeah.
The savings rate is huge. The problems are real, and I just don't see enough. I think there's a lot of room. If you're entrepreneurs listening,
Mhm.
you should consider starting a company in this space. The money will be there eventually because it should follow opportunity,
Yeah.
and there is one here.
Do you feel like there's just not an awareness from investors of looking at this demographic and wanting to address some of those concerns? It seems like when you look at the numbers, right, and we look at the population, that obviously this is a huge need.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not an investor.
Yeah. Wouldn't
I,
we love
I
to
could
know what they're thinking? Yeah.
I could guess some of it is, there haven't, since there are not a lot of innovators in this space, there haven't been a lot of great success stories.
Hmm.
There's no Facebook or Google or
Mm.
Amazon of aging. So
Hmm.
that's one thing.
Yeah.
I think investors take comfort in past success stories and comparables they can look at. The other thing is it's sometimes hard to project to something that you're not. We
Hmm.
saw that a lot in femtech as well, with most investors being male. There was an underinvestment in products that are focused on
Yeah.
women's health and stuff like that, not
Right.
because the problems didn't exist, but because it's harder for male investors to fully comprehend the problem, and
Hmm.
most investors are not
Hmm.
um, very old, and if they are, they might not want to admit it.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it, and it's also hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to build a product for
Hmm.
this population that's a bit different from the rest
Hmm.
of the population. It takes
Hmm.
determination and grit,
Hmm.
and there might be other areas that you can make a quicker buck in.
Yeah.
But what is innovation all about if not to solve the world's biggest issues?
Right. To look at what is this huge solution that we can bring in. And I feel like too, it's not glamorous, right? And so looking at it obviously from that perspective, but just encouraging and the lack of awareness. And we, I'm using my quotes, in the industry, there's been a conversation of it's actually what we see happening is people from outside of the industry are going to be disrupting that, because coming up with those new innovations, you can kind of almost take a step back and bird's eye view look at what's happening in the landscape and going, okay, we've got to address some of these problems. Uber's a good example of not necessarily, it wasn't built for the older adult population, and then now created Uber Health, which is offering more of those support services. So, yeah, it's interesting to see what'll happen in the next how many years.
I agree, and our team, except gerontologists on the team, are all not from the aging industry,
Yeah,
me included. We all
yeah.
came from other sectors. So I definitely agree that, as there are advancements in other of technology in other fields, they will
Hmm.
find their way into this area.
Yeah.
And by the way, I should have mentioned this before. I mean, we've been extremely fortunate. We're able to raise over $58 million to the company to
Hmm.
date from amazing
Amazing.
investors that believe in this.
Yeah.
My comment is more general one on the industry, but I'd love to see
Right.
more things happening, more
Hmm.
innovation happening in this
Hmm.
area.
Yeah, the call for that. Thank you. It's so important. And we underestimate too how tech literate our older adult population is, or their desire to want to interact with all of that's happening. Are you finding that there's that excitement and that appreciation of involving tech in our lives?
It's very hard to generalize
Hmm.
because the adult population is the general population,
Hmm.
just on average a bit older. So
Hmm.
you have all kinds, right? I
Hmm.
mean, we have people that got ElliQ because they love technology and they want to experience it and they read about it in science fiction books. And here's a robot companion that can be my friend. And we have customers that are extremely fearful of technology. And their main hesitation in getting ElliQ is that they're worried they won't be able to operate it and it will lead to frustration. And, hopefully they're convinced that this was designed exactly
Right.
for that.
Hmm.
So I think we see all kinds. I really find that the connecting fabric is more, are you living alone? Are you in need of social interaction? So these
Hmm.
are usually people that are more outgoing and extroverts in as part of their personality.
Yeah. Want
Um,
that
and
dynamic, that communication.
yeah, yeah. So that's more the connecting fabric than
Hmm.
a quest for technology.
Hmm.
Although in retrospect, yeah, we have a lot of comments for people that are loving this. And in fact, we recently added 11 of our customers into our QA team, into our quality assurance team. So these
so
are
good.
kind of very technology savvy customers, older adults, some of them in their late 80s, that just keep on coming up with feature ideas for us and so on. And we said, you know what? We have a new software release every 2 weeks. Why don't we give you a sneak peek a week before, and you guys can just give us feedback and tell us if we did a good job or not,
How important
which is
is that?
wonderful. So
Yeah. About your users, do you have like a favorite story of someone that loved it and interacted with it that you'd like to share with us?
there's so many.
Yeah.
Maybe one of them really touched my heart. And we had a user that lives in an independent living facility not far away from her sister. So there's all the support you can imagine. And she was really not feeling well. And she didn't tell anybody except ElliQ. And, ElliQ kept on checking up on her. And after a couple of days, like, started pushing for her to do something about this. And she didn't want to be a burden on other people or on her sister, and she thought it's nothing. And at the end of the day, ElliQ was successful in getting her to get help. And it turned out she had a UTI that turned into sepsis in her bloodstream.
My goodness.
She was hospitalized with IV antibiotics, and she was hours or days away from death.
Wow.
And we got a call from her sister, literally thanking us for saving her life. And that to me is a really unique story. More daily occurrences we get are often from family members that are just calling us to say, it's so amazing for us to see that every time we talk to mom, she gives us a story of what she did with ElliQ today and the funny joke that ElliQ told her, and she repeats it to her son, and so on. And of course, during COVID, we were flooded with feedback on how much of a help having ElliQ in people's life was when people were so isolated.
This has been such important conversation. I am so happy that we had the chance to visit and to share more about this. I really hope everyone goes to your website and checks it out. We will include all of that information in our episode description so people can click on the link, be directed right to your website to learn more and see how they can have ElliQ in their home.
Well, thank you so much. And I really hope people will see that ElliQ actually takes a very concentrated effort to increase and strengthen the relationship between loved ones and their older adult family member. She's not there to replace them. She's there to make a stronger bond, to provide a little bit of peace of mind, to be with mom when you can't be with her. And I think that dynamic of actually bringing people together is super important. And I'd like to mention just one more, that we started working with state governments lately to try to also bring local services, because the states are doing so much. They have so much services available for the older adult, whether it's the senior center or a hot meal delivery program or mental health support or wellness coaches or all kinds of events like concerts and so on and so forth to build a community. And it's very hard for them to engage the older adults that are very much at home into that support network, which is right outside their door very often. So I'm super excited of this next phase that ElliQ, in addition to connecting to the family and closing the digital divide and being there for the older adult, will actually help bring these great services that states via the counties and their cities are offering our elder population.
Bringing the community in, and it really does let families focus on then those uniquely human connections, which is what they should be able to do, and have ElliQ be able to support all of those other components of it. Thank you, Dor. This has been so fun.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.